Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Many in Atlantic Canada are preparing for the worst as Hurricane Fiona is about to hit the Maritimes. The woman who almost died in a knife attack in Lethbridge earlier this summer met and thanked the first responders who saved her life. And Ukraine, Russia, and the United States faced off during a debate in New York at the UN Security Council. We have the details.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Many in Atlantic Canada are preparing for severe winds and heavy rainfall this weekend with the imminent arrival of Hurricane Fiona. Environment Canada says the rain and damaging winds will likely cause major power outages. Fiona was expected to reach Nova Scotia tonight and then onto Prince Edward Island by Saturday. PEI's Deputy Premier Darlene Compton says they're preparing for the worst.
As we prepare for what some are calling an historic storm surges, high winds, and lots of rain, there are a few more things to share with residents. Tonight and overnight and into tomorrow, some people may be curious and want to get closer to look at the storm. My message is simple. Don't. Don't go near the water. Don't put yourselves and others at risk. It's dangerous. You may then need emergency help, and our first responders will come and help, but our resources really need to be focused on where we need them and where we need them to be.
After leaving PEI, Hurricane Fiona is then expected to turn its attention to Quebec's North Shore and southeastern Labrador on Sunday. Many regions could see winds up to 140 kilometers an hour with waves more than 10 meters high. Emergency officials are also preparing for the potential of major flooding. Fiona caused historic flooding when it ran through Puerto Rico earlier this week, destroying both roads and bridges. U.S. President Joe Biden met with emergency officials and vowed that his government is ready to help Puerto Rico recover from the devastation left behind by Hurricane Fiona.
We're surging federal resources to Puerto Rico, and we'll do everything we can to meet the urgent needs you have, and we know they're real and they're significant. And we're there, and an old bad joke, I'm from the federal government, I'm here to help. We really are. I think I hope you're satisfied with the response so far. We'll be with the folks of Puerto Rico now and until this is done, until we recover. And my wife and I were talking about it last night. We pray for I know the death toll was up a little bit, but all the people displaced and all the people who are just scared to death knowing what happened before, especially if you went through it last time. It's got to be incredibly intimidating.
Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre talked about a report from the Fraser Institute which says Canadians are paying more in taxes than on food, clothing, and shelter combined. During question period earlier today, Poilievre says the Trudeau Liberals need to eliminate their planned tax increases.
And with this coinciding with 40-year highs in inflation, 40-year highs in food price increases, with reports of students in Toronto forced to live in homeless shelters. The government's plan is to raise taxes on paychecks, on gas, on heat, and on other essentials. In fact, they want to triple the carbon tax. Now is not the time for a tax hike. Will the government cancel these planned tax increases?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, it is incredibly unfortunate that the leader of the Conservative Party has tried to tackle inflation and tackle affordability by giving investment advice on highly speculative assets. For those Canadians who did follow the advice of the Leader of the Opposition, I am truly sorry that you lost your life savings.
Yeah.
But as long as he's giving that investment advice, I think Canadians should ask, if we can't trust him to be our stockbroker, why would we want him to be our Prime Minister?
Longtime diplomat Jennifer May is Canada's new ambassador to China. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau named May to the post, saying she will be advancing Canada's work to stand up for democratic values, human rights, and the rule of law. The post was vacant when Dominic Barton stepped down last December following the release of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. The two Michaels were detained in China for nearly 3 years in what was seen as political retaliation after Canadian authorities arrested Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou at the request of the United States. The Alberta government says opioid-related deaths in our province have dropped by close to 50% compared to a peak late last year. Officials say the 47% drop is thanks in part to treatment and recovery options that have been made available. Mike Ellis, the Associate Minister for Mental Health and Addictions, says the 6-week period from the end of June to the beginning of August last year saw 1,377 opioid-related EMS responses. The same period this year saw 838 responses. Health officials say emergency department visits and hospitalizations have also dropped since their peak. Emergency department visits related to drug overdoses are down 33% of the second quarter, while hospitalizations were down 31%. During a 4-year period from 2016 to 2020, Alberta Health says we saw 65 opioid-related deaths here in the South Zone. The province announced that it is expanding apprenticeship education to help more and more Albertans find new jobs in booming sectors of the economy. Over the next 3 years, the government is investing more than $10 million to expand apprenticeship education at post-secondaries across the province. Minister of Advanced Education, Dimitrios Nicolaides, says the extra funding will create an additional 300 apprenticeship seats.
This will be an exciting time for our institutions as they collaborate with industry to determine what skills are most in demand and what new apprenticeship learning programs they can develop. I'm sure we'll receive some incredible proposals as we work with our institutions and employers over the coming months to determine how this $13 million can be best put to use. By aligning our new learning opportunities with the priorities of industries, we are building a skilled labor force to meet current and future demands.
Arthur Pawlowski, the man who fought many of the government's COVID-19 mandates and lockdowns and who even spent time in jail fighting those measures, is the new leader of the Independence Party of Alberta. He made the announcement earlier this week on his YouTube channel. He said God spoke to him while he was in jail to become a politician.
I stood up from my solitary cell right there and started walking back and forth like a lion, trapped in a cage. And I had this feeling, this overwhelming feeling that God wanted me to run for political office. And that's what I said, fine, if they will not let me be a pastor, which that's the only thing I want to do. I want to be a pastor, I want to feed people, leave me alone. I've told them that thousands of times. 340 citations later, 16 arrests, and over 100 court cases. Finally, in that solitary cell that I was arrested for my speech, for my church service in Coutts, finally I realized those people are never going to leave me alone. And if I cannot be a pastor, which I want to be, I will become a pastor politician. And what was chasing me yesterday?
Looks like the rain clouds have left much of southwestern Alberta, and it appears like a nice weekend is shaping up. Jeanette Roche is now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, we will be back into the 20-plus degree temps before you know it.
Yeah, it's going to be feeling just like summer all over again. How we actually saw the temperature rise up to 20 degrees today. Over the weekend, that mercury is going to rise even higher, up to 22 degrees. And beyond that, we're looking at temperatures rising to the mid to high 20s next week. Even overnight this evening, temperatures staying as low as 11 degrees. Still pretty warm, so it's almost like summer 2.0. I will definitely take that. I will have the 7-day forecast coming up for you later on in the show.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Many first responders came to the aid of Catherine Linder, who was taken hostage in a downtown business over the summer. Now, more than 2 months after the frightening knife attack, Linder is saying thank you to all of the emergency officials who saved her life on that fateful day. Angela Stewart has the story.
Thank you. Every one of you. You did your jobs. You did jobs well.
This was the heartwarming scene at a Lethbridge fire hall Friday as Catherine Linder embraced the first responders who saved her life more than 2 months ago at the Legal Guidance Office.
It's such a wonderful opportunity to be able to say thank you to everybody who had a part in saving my life.
Linder was reunited with many police officers, paramedics, and firefighters who attended the scene on July 14th.
I'm just so very grateful for everybody that was there.
Linder was working the front counter on that Thursday afternoon when her attacker, a client of the office, had demanded to speak to a specific lawyer. It was just moments later when Linder was taken hostage in a back room of the building.
When she barricaded the door, I thought, oh, this is not going to be the way I expected. As soon as I screamed, somebody help me, I heard a bang on the door. The officers were there.
She sustained life-threatening injuries to her neck and spent several days in the hospital.
My partner and I, Braden, were the responding paramedics to the call.
Many emergency officials attended to Linder's aid, including Tyler Skog, a paramedic with the Lethbridge Fire and EMS.
We were staged for about an hour and 45 minutes prior to the event taking place, and we took over care of Catherine from LPS on scene.
Staff Sergeant Leon Borbandy, acting as incident commander on the day of the attack, says fortunately these types of incidents don't happen very often.
They're still fortunately very rare. I've been a police officer for 26 years, and this is the first such incident I've been involved in.
Friday's reunion, although uncommon,
it's not every day we get to meet our patients,
was equally as special for both the first responders involved and Linder.
A huge thank you to Catherine for coming.
To have that efforts recognized and appreciated always feels good.
I thank you on behalf of all of my family. I thank you.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Lethbridge police are investigating another stabbing. This incident occurred earlier today at a home on the city's south side. Police say they received a call around 12:30 a.m. at a residence in the Fairmont subdivision. When they arrived, they located a 59-year-old male and female, both with stab wounds. They were transported by EMS to hospital, where they remain in serious but stable condition. Investigators say the matter is domestic related and no other subjects are being sought in connection with the incident. The investigation is ongoing. The City of Lethbridge is looking for your input on the potential development of a sober shelter. The open house event will take place at City Hall tomorrow from 10 a.m. till 2 p.m. and again on Monday from 4 p.m. till 8 p.m. City officials say if you're unable to make it either open house, you can also submit your feedback online at getinvolvedlethbridge.ca. The city is looking into developing a potential interim sober shelter at the former Civic Curling Center. Funding will be provided by the province, but the city will pick the location incorporating feedback from residents. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has been promoting many of our natural resources, including hydrogen. Hydrogen appears to be in abundance, and many argue it is a solid alternative fuel source. John Sutherland is the CEO of Alberta H2. He says what's great about hydrogen is that it's a byproduct from the wastewater found in the oil and gas sector.
The feedstock for our technology here in Alberta, for example, is actually using what many would consider a wastewater as a byproduct of oil and gas. It gets injected back down into a reservoir in perpetuity is what the thinking was. We can use that byproduct as our feedstock to produce hydrogen. So, the potential for hydrogen production in this province is enormous.
Make sure you catch the full interview with John Sutherland discussing the many benefits of hydrogen. That's coming up after Business News. The U.S. has made its case at the UN Security Council for why Russia should face further censure and isolation over Putin's invasion of Ukraine. This follows Ukrainian President Zelensky at the United Nations laying out a forceful case against Russia's invasion.
Ukrainian and international investigators continue to exhume bodies outside of Izium, a city Russian forces controlled for 6 months before they were driven out by Ukrainian counteroffensive. One site contains some 440 unmarked graves. A number of the bodies unearthed there so far reportedly show signs of torture, including one victim with broken arms and a rope around his neck.
Such outrages remain unpunished because the United States and their allies, with the connivance of international human rights institutes, have been covering up the crimes of the Kiev regime.
The amount of lies coming from the Russian diplomats is quite extraordinary. Today, we are mostly focusing on crimes committed by Russian soldiers in Ukraine. But if anyone thinks they are the only one ready to kill, torture, rape, cut off genitals, they are wrong. Russian diplomats are directly complicit because their lies incite these crimes and cover them up.
NASA is about to clobber a small asteroid millions of miles away in a first-of-its-kind experiment to test the ability of warding off a threatening space rock.
this Monday evening with a small asteroid called Dimorphos, which is circling around a bigger asteroid called Didymos. Neither of these asteroids are headed towards Earth, but we are testing to see if you can make impact with an asteroid and change its trajectory in case we ever do find an asteroid headed towards Earth.
This demonstration is extremely important to our future here on the Earth and life on Earth.
You gotta love technology. The town of High River, south of Calgary, is hosting its 10th International Balloon Festival. Pilots from across Canada, the United States, the UK, and Belgium are attending the event this weekend.
This is our 10th one. We do it each year. It started in 2013 as a result of, or partly because of the flood that happened. We wanted to do something for the community. I lived in the community. I still live in the community. And I've been to a number of balloon events and felt that this might help lift some of the spirits of the folks in town, to get that lift of spirits. So we had, I called in a bunch of friends from the balloon community. They'd all known what happened, of course, through the media. So 20 of them, I think, came to High River, and we put on a balloon festival. And it was actually amazing for the community and sort of was that first major thing towards recovery after flood. And we've been doing it every year since, at the end of September. It's growing, and each year we get pilots. We got pilots coming from as far away as Belgium and Bristol, England, and the U.S., Ottawa, Montana, all over.
The amazing thing is that there's still about 7 or 8 of the people who I was ballooning with in the 70s and early 80s who are still here at this event ballooning here now, and they've been working with balloons for over 40 years.
Should be a fairly colorful sky this weekend. As for our sky around Lethbridge, it should be mainly sunny. Fairly nice weekend is shaping up. Full weather details are on deck. We had more light showers in some parts of southwestern Alberta earlier today. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a full look at the forecast. Jeanette, we experienced a bit of rain, but nothing like what many in Atlantic Canada may experience this weekend with the arrival of Hurricane Fiona.
Yeah, that's right. Fiona will be impacting Atlantic Canada and eastern Quebec with some heavy rainfall and some hurricane force winds beginning tonight. Here in Lethbridge, though, the skies are going to clear up, making way for a beautiful sunny week before us, as you can see. Overnight low 11 degrees, experiencing some west winds 30 to 50 k into tomorrow, Saturday. Those winds only gusting to 20 kilometers per hour. 22 the high for both Saturday and Sunday, up to 25 for Monday and Tuesday, all the way up to 28 on Wednesday, and then 26 on Thursday. So we're in for a beautiful, lovely summer-like week, even though we are now in autumn. Average high for this time of year, 19. Average low, 4 degrees, 32. That was our high temperature on this day back in 1994. And in 1946, it was a chilly -5 on this day. 7:19 is when the sun rose this morning. Our sun set this evening at 7:28 p.m., giving us 12 hours and 9 minutes of daylight, so 4 minutes shorter than we had it yesterday. It's happening fast. Okay, on the west coast, tomorrow looking at 18 degrees for both Victoria and Vancouver with a mix of sun and cloud. Fog patches in both of those cities, a bit warmer inland in Vancouver. Edmonton, 17 and sunshine, 30 to 50 k winds. Calgary looking at a high of 19 tomorrow with lots of sunshine. As we look to the rest of the prairies, we're looking at some shower activity, 30% chance of showers in all 3 of these cities. Saskatoon sitting at 20 degrees, 20 degrees also in Regina tomorrow, 17 the high in Winnipeg. Saskatoon and Regina looking at wind gusts up to 60 kilometers per hour. It's going to be a little bit windy in those cities. Toronto sitting at 17 tomorrow with some shower activity. Ottawa 19, and same thing for Montreal, 19 the high there with mainly sunny skies. Now Atlantic Canada and eastern Quebec getting ready to brace for Hurricane Fiona, as those heavy rains and hurricane force winds will be impacting this area, particularly Charlottetown and Halifax tomorrow. Charlottetown seeing wind gusts up to 150 kilometers per hour this evening, and tomorrow wind gusts up to 120 kilometers per hour in Halifax. Also experiencing 60 to 80 millimeters of rain this evening and 30 to 40 millimeters of rain tomorrow. Fredericton sitting at some showers, 13 the high tomorrow, 12 degrees the high in Halifax tomorrow, 13 the high in Charlottetown, and up to 20 degrees tomorrow in St. John's, Newfoundland, with 2 millimeters of rain expected there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Stats Canada says the number of international arrivals increased in July, but is yet to recover from pre-pandemic levels. The agency says the number of trips by U.S. residents in July was 2.2 million. That was 11 times higher than the number of trips taken in July of last year. Stats Canada says Canadians made about 6 times more trips than a year earlier. Like U.S. visitors, however, that number was still below the July 2019 levels, with about 64% of that month's volume. The figures include the period when random mandatory COVID-19 testing for vaccinated travelers paused in June before resuming later in July for travelers arriving in Canada by air. The last of Canada's border restrictions will disappear at the end of the month. 2 senior government sources say a cabinet order affecting mandatory vaccinations, testing, and quarantine of international travelers set to expire on September 30th will not be renewed. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reportedly signed off on the decision not to renew the rules yesterday. The government had long pointed to random testing as a way to screen for the arrival of new COVID-19 variants, but experts say there are more convenient ways of doing that. Alberta is known for its coal mining and mining of precious metals. But did you also know that digital currency is mined right here? You may be familiar with the term Bitcoin. It is a decentralized digital currency that can be transferred on the peer-to-peer Bitcoin network. Ryan Chernesky is the director of modern mining in Medicine Hat and explains how Bitcoin is actually mined.
What makes Bitcoin different is it was born in the private sector, and every 10 minutes, computers around the world take all of these transactions. They compute and they compete for solving a puzzle that's on the protocol. So there's a mathematical puzzle. Every computer in the Bitcoin network is trying to solve that problem. The winning computer that solves that problem receives Bitcoin as a reward.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Ryan Chernesky of Modern Mining coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets, which took it on the chin yet again today. The TSX was down 521 points in the day to finish at 18,480. The Dow was down 486 points to 29,590. The S&P 500 was down 64 points to 3693, and the Nasdaq was down 198 on the day to 10,867. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 411 to 79.38 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 23 cents to 6.86 US. Gold was down 26.20 on the day to 16.45.02 US an ounce, and silver was down 76 cents to 18.88 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $11.43 per bushel, barley's at $8.81, canola's at $17.88, and corn is at $11.88 per bushel. Live cattle were down 60 cents to $144.25. Feeder cattle were up 38 cents to $178.35, and lean hogs were down $1.50 to $92.63. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.56 US. Recapping one of our top stories, with Hurricane Fiona making its way to Atlantic Canada, people are stocking up on food and stormproofing essentials ahead of its arrival. The storm is being characterized as historic by meteorologists, with winds expected to hit 140 kilometers an hour and waves around 10 meters high. The storm is expected to hit Nova Scotia later this evening before moving on to PEI on Saturday. The province has been preaching hydrogen to many business leaders around the world. Alberta apparently has an abundant supply. Coming up, a chat with John Sutherland, the CEO of Alberta H2, who will discuss the many practical uses of hydrogen. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Gather your family and friends for a beautiful evening and support a worthy cause. On Saturday, October 15th, the Covenant Foundation in Lethbridge is holding their Harvest Moon Ball at the Sandman Signature Lethbridge Lodge. Enjoy an elegant meal, exciting silent and live auctions, and a live musical performance by the Chevelles. Funds raised will go to support the greatest needs at Covenant Health's St. Michael's Health Center and St. Therese Villa. For tickets, visit covenantfoundation.ca/Harvest Moon Ball. Do you have a heart to serve our community? Streets Alive Mission is looking for volunteers to help make sandwiches, sort incoming donations, assist with Foot Friday and many other opportunities to serve, receive training, and to provide support for this important cause of bringing hope to the hopeless. Visit streetsalive.ca to fill out their volunteer application or call 403-320-1159. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Are electric vehicles a stopgap before other clean fuel sources? As governments try to transition away from oil and gas, are there other fuel alternatives? One such potential fuel is hydrogen. Joining us now to talk a little hydrogen is John Sutherland, the CEO of Alberta H2, who joins us now from Calgary. John, welcome to Bridge City News.
Well, thank you, Hal. Thanks for having me.
So, John, can you share a little bit about how your company started, Alberta H2?
Yeah, sure. Alberta H2 is an Alberta company, and our principal founder is actually a longtime oil and gas engineer who saw an opportunity within oil and gas to produce hydrogen. So he followed his instincts, and we're onto something. We have a patent application in, so we're looking forward to executing on his dreams.
So, John, how plentiful is hydrogen in Alberta and across Canada right now? And where does Canada really rank when it comes to supplying hydrogen?
Well, Canada, it's an emerging industry. Hydrogen, if you look at the filling stations across Canada, we have, at last count I saw, we had 5. So if you're hoping to have a hydrogen powered vehicle, certainly in 2023, it's perhaps a little bit too soon to find a filling station, but there are lots of incentives in Canada to pursue hydrogen. And, at this point in time, we hear that there's, some of the large industries are really focused on hydrogen production. And I can certainly add to how we're going to play a role in that. It may be small in the beginning, but I can tell you how we're going to do that as well.
So, John, how do you really see hydrogen powering Alberta and our economy in the future? I know we've seen Premier Kenney touring around promoting hydrogen to other markets around the world.
Yeah, hydrogen, I think, has the potential to be a viable, I won't say alternative, but supplement our current energy resources. Our fossil fuels have done as well for many decades, and I think we're going to see that in the decades to come. Really, it's now what alternative energy sources are there out there that can practically supplement that oil and gas foundation. And at Alberta H2, we see a potential niche for hydrogen in this province and in fact, our country. So we're looking forward to, firstly, proving our technology and then hoping to deploy it out there.
So who would you say are some of your biggest clients right now? Which industries in particular?
Well, getting back to where Alberta H2 really started, within, recognizing oil and gas. So the technology, and I don't want to delve too much into it, but that the feedstock for our technology here in Alberta, for example, is actually using what many would consider a wastewater as a byproduct of oil and gas. It gets injected back down into a reservoir, I guess in perpetuity is what the thinking was. We can use that byproduct as our feedstock to produce hydrogen. So, the potential for hydrogen production in this province is enormous. And that's using our type of technology, which is electrolysis.
So now the technology your company uses for creating hydrogen as a fuel, has it been around for a long time?
Electrolysis has been around. The science of electrolysis has been around for I know for maybe 100 years or more. It's really just sort of in the last, I would say, 10 to 20 years, being recognized as a potential alternative when producing hydrogen. Typically, hydrogen is produced, the majority of hydrogen produced in the world right now is done using methane as a feedstock. Given where we are here in this oil and gas basin in Western Canada, being able to use this produced water or wastewater from oil and gas allows us to tap into a large resource for our feedstock. And I will add that Alberta H2 hydrogen production through electrolysis is also applicable to seawater. So, this goes well beyond the boundaries of Alberta and has applicability around the world.
So, John, let's delve a little more into how your technology can use water from the oil drilling process.
Well, sure. So, essentially, electrolysis is, if you want to look at it in the most simplistic forms, is applying an electrical energy source to water. And in our case, we have what they call ions in the water, which is really salt. And that salt allows the electrical current to move around the water. And so we're taking advantage of a natural benefit of that produced water to help generate hydrogen production. So the produced water or seawater, when we're able to get to that stage, really doesn't require much of any conditioning. We have a natural electrolyte that just happens to be a waste, or in the case of seawater, something that's in a massive abundance.
John, what do you think has really been the cause for hydrogen to sit at the back of the bus while oil and gas has been steering the bus for so many generations here in Alberta?
Great question, Hal. Well, I mean, when you look at oil and gas, it's a very established technology. The first oil and gas was really discovered over 100 years ago. And so we've had many decades to perfect that and reduce the costs and that type of thing, make it more cost effective. Hydrogen really is, we talked about electrolysis, the science being around for many years, but when you look at the hydrogen production, to really zero in on that from electrolysis, and even using the other technology, getting hydrogen from methane, that is relatively more recently. And so the costs to bring that hydrogen production down we're experiencing that now, but we're going to see more of that into the future before it can become competitive with fossil fuels.
John, is there something that really sets Alberta apart from other jurisdictions when it comes to hydrogen and hydrogen production?
Another great question. Look, I've spent the majority of my career in oil and gas, and I've seen great innovation within this sector. And I believe that anywhere where you have existing innovation and creativity, you have the ability to pivot and also a vision and a desire to try some different things. And so I think Alberta is a terrific arena to test these waters, so to speak.
Now, there's a hydrogen fueling station in North Van and on Vancouver Island. How do you see the infrastructure being built across the country?
Well, there's I've had so many discussions on this. Is it a chicken and an egg situation where if you build the hydrogen filling stations, the hydrogen vehicles will follow? When you look at the other filling stations, they're in Ontario, and we seem to be having those stations positioned probably mostly to deal with large transport, and also in places where there's higher population. So I think you're going to see a gradual spreading out from those larger centers, but I think it's going to emanate from those large centers first, because that's where you're going to have the larger demand with those centers.
Now, is this a fuel that will really be cost effective for both industry and retail customers?
You know, we're in the midst of I would say we're onto something with this. There's been a lot of studies done on the unit cost of hydrogen versus the unit cost of natural gas or gasoline and those types of things. And so getting back to the creativity and innovation, I see those are the types of things that can bring those costs down and improve the product, improve the purity, and help make this viability become a reality.
So what are you seeing right now from car manufacturers, John, in terms of hydrogen models?
Well, another great question. So I was fortunate to be able to present at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention in April in Edmonton, first one, in fact, here in Alberta, and had a chance to tour around the various exhibits. Toyota had a model on the floor there, and had a chance to talk to the people at that particular exhibit, this Toyota is ahead of the curve when it comes to car manufacture. Hydrogen produced powered vehicles, and so when you look at where they're at, it's astonishing. A significant range on a if I can just use the quotes, a tank of hydrogen propels that car over 1,300 kilometers, and that's quite a significant range. I know, there's been a lot of discussion over the battery-powered cars and cold climates and those things, but hydrogen can transcend those. It operates differently.
What would it actually cost to fill a car? Like you said, you get 1,300 K, let's say a car's got, I don't know, a 50, 60 liter tank. I know it'd be different technology, but what would it cost to fill, let's say, one of those Toyotas you were talking about?
Good question again. So, I don't know what's to blame for the answer to this, the metric system or what have you, but the hydrogen is usually quoted in kilograms, and we buy fuel, as you know, in liters and gallons and things like that. So, but the equivalent cost for a tank to get you 1,300 kilometers is about $60 or $65.
Oh, wow. That's incredible range, 1,300 K. I'm thinking right now with my Chrysler 300 with a Hemi, I'm lucky if I get 350 K, and it costs me about $85 to fill it right now. Now, John, is hydrogen something we could heat our homes and businesses with?
Yeah, another great question. In a prior part of my career, I studied combustion and was part of a business that was our core competency. But I do know that ATCO is currently undergoing a sort of a pilot project near Edmonton to heat a number of homes by blending hydrogen in with the natural gas. So really, it's a great energy source, and I can't recall what the blending percentage is, but it's in the neighborhood of about 20% of the volume. So absolutely, and it's clean. It doesn't require any retrofits to your heating system in your home as you know it now. So quite a seamless exercise.
Now, John, there are a lot of other products that are made from oil and gas. Oil specifically, we think of plastics, we think of driveways, asphalt driveways and so forth. Is hydrogen this kind of substance that can be used as a building block or component like petrochemicals?
When I started my presentation in in Edmonton in April, and again here at the Global Energy Show in June, I confessed that electrochemistry was not my strength, and that's why I sided with a founder who has a great strength in this. To my knowledge, Hal, hydrogen does not have that type of versatility. When you look at fossil fuels, some of those molecules are longer than our arms combined. So there's just a lot of possibilities in refining some of those, some of those derivatives. Hydrogen, I think the best way I look at it, and I believe this is to be true, is that hydrogen is really strictly an energy source.
John Sutherland, CEO of Alberta H2, thanks so much for teaching us all about hydrogen today and for joining us from Calgary.
Hal, thanks for having me.
Cryptocurrency has been with us for over 10 years, and this component of the financial world is still a mystery to some of us. We definitely hear about the volatility in the crypto markets and that there are winners and losers. And then there's a whole mining process, and what do we even use these digital currencies for? Well, to unravel and reveal more about cryptocurrencies and their connection to Medicine Hat and area, Ryan Chernitzky, Director of Modern Mining, joins me today. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So first off, Ryan, can you maybe give us a brief idea of what crypto or digital currencies are?
Yeah, so digital currencies started back in 2009 with Bitcoin. So it's been with us for about 13 years now. Bitcoin was the granddaddy of all cryptocurrencies. To this day, they don't really even know who the founder was, which is part of the mystery and aura to it. But it's a technology that was put together with the idea. It was born out of the Great Recession, the crisis that occurred back in 2009. And it's basically an answer to excess money printing by the government. It's a private currency. And since that day that Bitcoin was born, there are now thousands of other cryptocurrencies. They are not the same as Bitcoin. Each has its own different use and case. But Bitcoin remains sort of the central sun, if you will, with all those other cryptocurrencies revolving around it.
Sounds a little confusing, almost like you need to go to a university of cryptocurrency or something to understand it all.
Yeah, the basics are fairly simple, but you're right. Once you dive down the rabbit hole, there is a lot of information to learn, which is part of what we do these interviews for, to try to explain to people, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there on cryptocurrencies. Some are valid and some are downright wrong, but that's just because a lot of people just don't understand the technology yet.
Yeah. So what are these digital currencies being used for right now?
So they're in their infancy. So I equate the digital currency space right now to the way internet back in the late 90s, when internet first came along. We didn't really know what the use cases were going to be for it. So in the world right now, there's payment systems that occur. So there's companies like Square, which have payment systems. They use digital currencies. The blockchain is the underlying technology for digital currencies. And if you, to understand a blockchain, all it is a ledger. Debits and credits, we've had those in accounting for years and years. Well, that ledger gets digitized, and why it's called a blockchain is all of the transactions that occur are blocked, and every few minutes they're added to a chain. So computers keep track of this digital ledger, and they all connect with each other, and they make sure that that digital ledger for each computer is the same. And that way it's called immutable. There can't be changes to that digital ledger. So that's, where things are evolving. Our payment systems right now, we've got Visa, we've got MasterCard. We will continue to use those, I believe. Those are companies that are incumbents. They've been there for a long time. But in the background, they're starting to use blockchain technology to underpin their checks and balances as they do their payment systems in behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned this is private. So what do governments think about this, and banks for that matter?
That's the $1 million question. governments don't like, particularly authoritarian type governments, don't like when there is something separate that they can't control. Even our own governments like to have control so that there's some checks and balances and oversights. And Bitcoin has had the criticism of being used by the criminal underground networks and all that. And in the past, that's occurred, but that also occurs with US dollars, with Canadian dollars. In fact, up to 5% of transactions that are done in US dollars are considered illicit. So it's not like a cryptocurrency has is the only place where illicit activities would occur. Governments, I think over time will start to embrace the technology more, but there needs to be regulation for it. So industries like ours, we're happy with the regulations. I think blocking the technology in terms of Bitcoin, it's actually that horse is out of the barn. It's been around for 13 years now. I think jurisdictions in North America, especially, and Europe are starting to accept it. They would rather tax and regulate it as opposed to somewhere like China, which has outright tried to ban it. But even to this day, China tried to ban to ban Bitcoin mining. It's still 20% of the world's hash rate comes out of China. So it's virtually impossible to ban it completely.
That's interesting. So can people literally order a pizza with it? Or, I've heard cases like that. I think it just depends on who accepts it, right?
There was a famous case way back when the guy tried to buy 2 pizzas. He spent 10,000 Bitcoin each, I think, for each pizza. And I haven't done the math today because Bitcoin is quite volatile.
Today it would have been worth $60,000 or something. It was like the most expensive pizza on earth.
I have tens of millions
Maybe
of dollars.
even more,
It is. Yeah, it's crazy. So the poor guy should not have spent his Bitcoins on pizza.
No, he shouldn't have. So you mentioned mining earlier. So maybe tell us a little bit more about how these currencies are mined or created.
Yeah, so if you look at our currency right now, the Canadian dollar, it's created by the central banks. So there's the US central bank, the Fed Reserve, there's the Canadian central banks. That's where our money comes from now. In the Bitcoin world, it comes from an emission schedule. So there's a protocol. What makes Bitcoin different is it was born in the private sector, and every 10 minutes, computers around the world take all of these transactions. They compute and they compete for solving a puzzle that's on the protocol. So there's a mathematical puzzle. Every computer in the Bitcoin network is trying to solve that problem. The winning computer that solves that problem receives Bitcoin as a reward. So right now it's 6.25 Bitcoins are rewarded every 10 minutes. So there's 900 per day. And these computers are what secures the network. So essentially, they use energy, and that energy is used as sort of a force field to make sure that that computer network stays secure, which the Bitcoin network is now the most secure network on the planet, secured by over 2 million specialized computers that are continually trying to solve this mathematical puzzle. So unlike the central banks, which sort of print money behind the scenes out of thin air, no one really knows how much the Federal Reserve prints every day, or the Canadian banks. They'll report it, but behind the scenes, it's very difficult to tell that number. In the Bitcoin world, you can tell exactly how many Bitcoins are produced per day, how many will be produced next year. The end game is only 21 million. So it's a scarce resource. When something is scarce, it becomes more valuable over time as its utility increases.
That's incredible. Okay, so your company, Modern Mining, that's what you do, right? You create cryptocurrency, and you are located in Medicine Hat, right?
Correct. We're a Bitcoin miner based in Alberta, out of Medicine Hat.
Yep. Why did you choose Medicine Hat for a mining location?
So the Alberta electricity market, and electricity is our biggest expense in the business, is deregulated, but there are regulations in Alberta. So throughout most of Alberta, you have to pay transmission and distribution charges. Alberta allows municipalities to produce their own electricity. And what's unique about Medicine Hat is there are large gas fields in the area. So energy for Medicine Hat is produced through these through generators for these gas fields. And the transmission and distribution charges, which are one of our biggest expenses on the electricity cost side, is less expensive there. So, we worked with the municipality. Businesses like ours, bring in jobs, and that's what municipalities want. So they've been wonderful to work with, and we certainly would like to continue to grow in Alberta, stay within Canada. There are some difficulties in the Canadian system with, we're trying to work with other jurisdictions are a little bit more friendly to Bitcoin miners, but we certainly would like to develop the technology more north of the border here.
Yeah, definitely. So do you think Medicine Hat or maybe other parts of southern Alberta could become kind of like a hub for this new kind of mining?
I think they could. Yeah, I think the Alberta government has a mandate to try to expand our business within Alberta beyond oil and gas. We're trying to diversify our electrical sector so that it's not reliant on fossil fuels. I think Bitcoin mining, one of the big utilities of it is that it can help to balance out electrical grids. So as we move towards more wind and solar, the sun always doesn't shine, the wind doesn't always blow. And so what energy providers have to do is they build those solar farms and wind farms much greater scale than they need to be, because on days when it's cloudy and not windy, you don't have as much energy. So if you put a Bitcoin miner on site, then when there's too much energy produced, windy days, sunny days, Bitcoin miners can use that energy because it's in abundance. When there's no wind and no sun, there's less energy produced. We need to, turn on our machines at home. Then the Bitcoin miners can shut down. There's more energy to go out to the grid. So instead of these highs and lows that you get, it tends to flatline the grid much more and keep the prices stable. So there's one of the real world utilities where power companies are starting to recognize that a fleet of Bitcoin miners on site monetizes that excess energy and helps to reduce prices and costs for you and I at home.
Interesting. So is solar a viable power source then for your kind of mining?
It's coming along. It's the problem with solar, right, is our battery technology is getting there. It's not quite there yet. So it's great when the sun's shining, but what do you do at nighttime when all of a sudden the electricity disappears? The miners we use, they're very expensive. So they like to be online 24/7, 365. So as battery technology improves, I think solar is going to be a much more useful in Bitcoin mining. But there are companies out there right now. I believe Square's one of them. Tesla might be as well. I think they're testing out large-scale solar Bitcoin mining operations. And like I mentioned previously, I don't have a crystal ball for the future, but I do believe it's going to be a strong part of our network in the future on our electrical grid to help stabilize things.
That's so interesting. Okay, so on the topic of southern Alberta, of course, so one of the big topics of conversation in this region is Orphan Wells. So how is your company or maybe others helping with a solution to this?
That's a unique problem to Alberta. I mean, we're in oil and gas, and we know there's thousands of orphan wells out there that need to be remediated. Well, the government, the taxpayer, they don't want to pay for it. Industry doesn't want to pay for it, but yet you've got thousands of wells out there. To my knowledge, no one is doing this right now, but we would be absolutely open to using Bitcoin mining to monetize the energy that's on site. And one of the beauties with Bitcoin miners is they're very portable. So you can take them, move them all over. They can go to remote sites. You could utilize that energy, turn that energy into dollars, use those dollars to then remediate the site. Each well site, whether it's $10,000 or $1 million, depending on what's been done there in the past, that would be a way where the taxpayer wouldn't be on the hook. The private sector can solve a problem. We can help diversify Alberta's economy, and we can get some of this environmental problem cleaned up. I think it's a huge utility use case for Bitcoin, which honestly, it hasn't even been looked at very much at all, but I think in the future it would be a great option.
So interesting. How big is this cryptocurrency sector currently?
It's big. It's growing from zero 13 years ago to over $1 trillion now. It's an industry that's here to stay. It is volatile. So like the stock market, sometimes Bitcoin and other certain cryptocurrencies get the reputation for a reason. Because they're so volatile, they're used by traders. There's good actors and bad actors in any business. And so we see that. We see a lot of volatility, even with Bitcoin right now. I think as time goes on, as governments get more involved, private industry gets more involved, public companies get more involved, you're going to see that volatility decrease. So we're about $1 trillion right now. It was up to $3 trillion at one point. So we're in a bear market right now. It's a little bit tougher in our industry, but the strong survive, and I think they'll come out much stronger as things tend to increase.
That's so interesting. How does somebody get started in it if you don't have it? Somebody just like Joe Schmo.
Yeah, you could actually go online. It's much more regulated now. So there are exchange houses where you can open up an account, know your client. So you'll fill out some various forms, driver's license you'll have to send in, and then you can open up. So it's like a brokerage account, and you can buy Bitcoin straight off those exchange houses. Now, once you get a little bit more involved, you can hold your coins privately. So that's part of the interest in Bitcoin is instead of holding your wealth at a bank where there's third-party liabilities to it, and it has to be insured by the government and lots of checks and balances. In this case, you can actually hold your wealth separately. In your own, I have one of them right here. This is a little ledger device. So you could literally have $100,000 if you wanted on a ledger device. Only the codes and access, so there's no third-party liability risk.
That's so crazy. What do you think is the future of cryptocurrency? Do you think it is the way of the future?
I do. I think there has to be, for any new technology, there has to be utility to it. So right now there's probably 20,000 different cryptocurrencies, tokens out there. I think 95% of them will die. I think trial and error companies are in there, seeing what works, seeing what sticks and what doesn't. I think certain of them, and it's very much like the internet was back in the late 90s, the Amazons of the world were born out of that. And I think you're going to see the same thing occurring right now. Those 20,000 are going to get whittled down, but those that do exist and continue will get much larger. I think Bitcoin, the granddaddy of them all, will be integrated to, like I said, Orphan Wells to help that. It'll get integrated into industry. Greenhouses, for example. If you want to grow food more locally and not import it from Mexico and California, long ways away, you could grow it locally. Well, how about using the heat that Bitcoin miners produce to heat greenhouses and reduce the cost there? So I think there's a great opportunity to localize things in terms of food growth production using Bitcoin miners as a heat source. So I think there's a great future ahead of it.
Absolutely fascinating. But Ryan, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us and filling us in on the world of digital currency.
Absolutely, Jeanette. Thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely. That was Ryan Chernitsky, Director of Modern Mining, Digging for Digital Values in Medicine Hat, Alberta. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.